Do you notice that it is that there's this ACL column? It's kind of hard to see because it's wrapped, but there's an ACL column and it has a capital A in there. That means we've got that network access control list applied. Okay. If we went back and set that qualify to yes in the Travis template, then it would apply, and we would show that was monitored for the qualify as well. The exclamation mark is a way of saying this is not, Travis is not really a SIP device. It's just a template that gets applied to other SIP devices. That's just the way of saying that I am a template.
Can you apply that to like extensions conf?
Absolutely. It's slightly different there. Typically, what you do there is not use a template in that sense, but what you can do is you can add to an existing context. Let me show you how to do that. Just for the fun. Oops, did I type that? Extensions.conf. Okay, so let's say we had a bunch of other stuff here, and then we wanted to come back and add some more stuff to our users context. We could say users parentheses plus sign. That means add this to the existing users context. Don't try to create a new context called users, but add this to the existing, and then we could say here's extension 6005.
How's that different from include?
Slightly different. We haven't talked about includes yet, so we'll come back to that. Hold that question. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. All right. So then we could do that. We do a dial plan reload. If we do a dial plan show users, hey, 6005 really is there. It's been added to that context. Okay, so that's a little bit about templates.
Between the two protocols, the Eax,
Mm-hmm.
which
Which is better? So the question was, between the SIP protocol and the Eax protocol, why are there two different protocols and which one's better? It's not a question of religion, and it's not politics either. But they're different protocols, and they both have their advantages in different situations. The SIP protocol is obviously very, very well known, very well supported, especially by handset manufacturers. Most handset manufacturers do the right thing with the SIP protocol. There are SIP trunk providers that use the SIP protocol that may or may not follow the SIP protocol to a strict degree. But for better or for worse, it's certainly better than H323 ever was, right? So that SIP has that going for it. Eax has some other advantages that make it really nice, especially if you're trying to trunk concurrent calls. There's a little feature we added called Eax trunking that really saves on the bandwidth. If you say you have 50 calls between point A and point B, all going down the same path, you can use a whole lot less bandwidth with the Eax protocol than you can with the SIP protocol. And so it's not really a SIP versus Eax. It's which one fits better for the circumstance that I'm in, for the particular thing I'm using. I use them both. I use SIP a whole lot, and I use Eax a whole lot, and use them for different things.
Isn't Eax only asterisk to asterisk server?
It was designed that way, but now there are a lot of other, it's primarily open source, telephony engines, things like FreeSwitch and Yate also support the Eax protocol. There are now device manufacturers that are building IP phones that speak the Eax protocol as well. A couple other advantages of the Eax protocol: it works much better behind NAT firewalls. Everybody's probably seen the horrific things that SIP and NAT firewalls do to each other, and the one-way audio problems and that sort of thing. Eax works great behind NAT firewalls, especially even if you have multiple layers of NAT firewalls. With Eax, the signaling and the media all share the same UDP port, and so from a networking standpoint, it's much easier. Just a single port you have to worry about on the firewall to either block it or allow it. So there's different advantages and disadvantages of both of them. The nice thing about it is we support both of them, and asterisk again is agnostic. It doesn't care whether a call came in SIP or a call came in Eax. It's just a call to asterisk.
Well, there is a question regarding the Eax, like a soft phone.
Mm-hmm.
What was the status correctly, same as SIP phone? Or do they still have a problem reporting certain status?
That's not a problem with the Eax protocol. That's just problems with certain implementations. with that people do in soft phones with Eax. You can do the same thing we did here with qualify statement. On the SIP phones, we can do that same thing with Eax phones. It's just up to the Eax device itself to respond properly to those poke packets to say, hey, are you alive? Question right here.
For example, you're building an Eax phone, like a phone 7.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be a separate file, or can you just add it to?
You would add this in. It would look just like what we've done here in SIP.conf. Almost all the options are exactly the same. It would just be in the Eax.conf configuration file, because it's the Eax channel driver that would read that.
The extension files, can you go back to the
Sure.
when you use the macro? Sorry, I was mistaken. Not the extension.
The SIP.conf.
No, los terminales.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
In the extensions configuration file, you have created the macro bulb or Travis or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it with all the content of the unit, only leaving out the password.
Yes. Yes.
You can,
So for example, you could say, hey, we want all these to be the same. We all want them to be type equals friend. We want them all to have host equals dynamic. We want them all to say context equals users.
the question is, in this case, if there are repeated sentences, for example, soft phone as a type friend,
Mhm.
but if you write there type
This would be just as if these 4 lines here were pasted at the top of this definition here. So this would override whatever was in the template. Yes. Did I? Oh, yep. There we go. Right. Right, and that's another good point that Eric brings up, is remember at the top of the SIP.conf configuration, there is a global section, and in the global section, where's our globals, or general, excuse me, general. Here's our general section, and here you can set things like what's the default context for things to go into. You can set things, what are the default codecs that we allow and disallow, those sorts of things. And that's one thing I didn't point out here. I'll take a minute to do right now here quickly. Before we break for lunch. Another thing you can do here is you can use the allow and disallow statements to allow different codecs. So what if we want to, again, we're going to disallow all the codecs, and then we're going to say allow. First I want to use the GSM codec, and if that phone doesn't support that, then we'll try MULAW. And if the phone doesn't support that, then we'll try ALAW. And if the phone doesn't support that, then we're going to go home. Sure. I just find if I separate them out onto different lines, then I want to reorder them later. It's a whole lot easier just to move lines up and down. So I tend to do it on separate lines, but they can be all on the same line as well. It's all the same. Asterisk is flexible. It's picky, but it's flexible.
So whatever you have for the specific user overrides whatever's in the general or in the template?
Correct. Yep. Which is the way you would want it. You want general settings, and then you want to be able to override those on a case-by-case basis. Yep, absolutely. Okay. So let's just had one more slide here, and then I'll open it up for questions and answers before we break for lunch. And that's just to kind of review some of the things we've learned here. We started off talking about how calls flow through the system. We've added some simple extensions, devices, to the system. Remember, the device is what we configure in the channel driver. The extension is in the dial plan, and then may ring one or more devices. May not ring anything at all. We talked about how to create a very simple PBX. We've just got a couple of phones here that ring each other. And we've talked about those debugging techniques and how important that is. Okay? Questions? Question over here.
So, is it possible to create 2 of these PBXs in the same machine for 2 different set of users?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, there's a couple of complications there. You either need to have them listening on different IP addresses or on different network ports. Okay? Because they can't both be listening on port 5060 on the same IP address for obvious reasons. But yes, absolutely, you can put multiple instances of Asterisk on the same machine. The easiest way to do that is to create different versions of your asterisk.conf configuration file and then point each instance at a different set of configuration files based on asterisk.conf.
What would be the benefit of having that over just partitioning one instance for?
The advantage of doing that is that you can start and stop them and restart them independently. They can even be different versions if you want them to be. Whereas if you just partition one Asterisk system in a different context for different users, it's still just one Asterisk system running, and you can't. So there's advantages and disadvantages both ways.
Is there a list of all the codecs that are supported?
Sure.
And if one's not supported, how hard is it to add?
So the way that you can test which ones are supported is go to the Asterisk CLI first of all, core show codecs. And there's a bunch of them. Now, some of these are supported as far as just pass-through only, or Asterisk understands the basic structure but can't do transcoding back and forth. And others, like the video codecs, we obviously can't do transcoding. Others, Asterisk can pass through but doesn't understand it all. If you type core show translation, this is one of my favorite commands, and I apologize, that's wrapping, and so it makes it really hard to read, but it actually builds a table of your different codecs, and so you can say, hey, to transcode from G729 to G723, to transcode a second worth of audio is going to take 5,000 milliseconds, or 5,000 microseconds, or whatever it's measured in. There's a CLI command, and I don't have any G729 licenses on here. I think it's just G729 show, and you can hit tab completion, and it'll try to. It should. Yeah, I don't have the module loaded for G729. It'll show you. But yeah, essentially the system will tell you these are the codecs I support transcoding on. This is how long it's going to take me to transcode to and from these various codecs. Adding support for a new codec isn't that hard, and I wish Russell hadn't walked out the room because he could give you more information on that. But essentially, it's letting Asterisk know the basic structure, and then how to transcode to and from, say, signed linear to that particular codec. And then Asterisk can find a translation path from something else to signed linear and signed linear to your codec and do those sorts of translations. So you don't have to, let's say you create a new codec called Bob. Okay? You don't have to tell Asterisk, hey, here's how to go from Bob to Mulan, Bob to Elon, Bob to G729. If you can go Bob to signed linear, Asterisk can always go Bob to signed linear to GSM, for example. You're going to have to provide that yeah. In Linux, it's a .so file, but it's a module that says this is how I convert back and forth from this to that. Yep, but it's not difficult. We had support for new codecs all the time. Polycom came out with their Siren 7 and Siren 14 codecs, and it wasn't too hard to code those in. When we started doing wideband codecs and stuff, we added those as well. It's not that difficult. There's much harder things to get into in the code of Asterisk than adding a codec. Let me put it that way. Question over here.
Can you tell me how to read that table? It doesn't wrap around like.
Sure. I wish it hadn't wrapped because it'd be easier to. Basically, there's a column across the top. Let me scroll up here. And across the top, there's the names of the different codecs, like G723, GSM, EULA, ELA, and so forth. And then down the left side as well, and then you just have to find the intersection between those two. What's the from and the to, or the to and the from? I always get it backwards. And if there's no number there, then you can't transcode between them in the current setup. So let's do an example here. There I've got MULA highlighted right here at the top. And if I come down here, I've got GSM on the left-hand side. That means it's going to take 1,001 microseconds to convert 1 second worth of audio from one to the other. That make sense? And that's going to be different on every single system. When you first start up Asterisk, Asterisk is going to compare all the codecs and say, on this particular system, it takes X amount of time. Now, somebody said something looks suspicious there.
It's always 1,000 or 1,001 or some.
Yeah, it used to be the number of milliseconds, and so it was a small number. And then somebody went in and said, well, let's have more precision there. Let's do it in microseconds. but the particular function they're using to calculate the time is basically rounding off the end anyway, and so it's kind of silly. But yeah, it's very suspicious.